What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Moving on to the next question. So let's say that you have two job offers and the descriptions of both of them are right here. What's the minimum amount of sales you have to make in the second job, this job right here, in order for the second job to pay higher than the first? So notice in this first job, you just have a standard $87,000 salary. In this second job, you have a base salary of $55,000. But you also get commissions. So you get 15% of any sales up to $100,000 plus 20% of any additional sales after $100,000. So the wording of this second one might be a little bit confusing. So for example, let's take two cases. Let's say that you made $80,000 in sales. Well, if you make $80,000 in sales, for this second job, you would get $55,000, your base salary, plus notice that this $80,000 is less than $100,000. Up to $100,000 in sales, you get 15% of those sales. So you'd get 15% of the $80,000, right? So your commission, this portion here, would end up being $12,000. And so your total earnings would be $67,000 in that second job. Now, let's say that you made $120,000 in sales. What would happen there? Well, in terms of the commission, the way it would be is for the first $100,000, you would make 15% of that. And then for the additional sales after 100,000, so notice that the additional sales after 100,000 are 20,000 if you make 120,000 in sales. So that remaining 20,000, you would make 20% on that, right? So it's any excess sales. So it's not you make 20% on the full 120,000. The first 100,000, you always make 15%, and then anything after the 100,000, any excess after, any additional sales after, so 20,000 in this case, you make 20%. So it's like a tiered commission structure. So that's how it works. So with the 120,000 in sales, your total earnings would be the 55,000 plus the 15% of the 100,000 plus the 20% of the 20,000, the remaining 20,000, which would be 55,000 plus 15,000 plus this would end up being what, 4,000? So your total commission would be 19,000. When you add it to that base salary, you would get 74,000. All right, so that's how it works. So just wanted to clarify that because the wording can be a little confusing. It may seem like you get 20% of that full amount, but it's a tiered structure. You get 15% of the first 100,000, then anything after that, any additional sales after that, you get 20% of that. So really, it's this number 2 that's a little tough to deal with. So what we can do is we can actually come up with two different scenarios. So if we let x equal the amount of sales, well, we can actually take this, this second job offer and we can create a piecewise function for it. So notice that you would get 55,000 plus 15% of the sales if your sales are less than or equal to 100,000, like that. Right? So that's what the function would be for your earnings at this second job if the sales are less than or equal to 100,000. You'd get 55,000 plus 15% of those sales. Now the question is, how can we make a function if the total amount of the sales is greater than 100,000? What would happen there? Well, you would still make that base salary of 55,000, So let me do this here. What would the commission be in this scenario? How can we generalize the commission? Well, if it's greater than 100,000, you would get 15% of the 100,000. So you would definitely get the 15,000. And then the remaining commission would be 20% of the sales that you made minus 100,000. Okay, does that make sense? So if we take that other scenario we did with the 120,000 in sales and we plug it in here, well, for that first 100,000, you would get 15,000. And then if we plug in 120 here, notice 120,000 minus 100,000, that gives us 20,000 here times 0.2 would give us 4,000, which would give us 19,000, which is what we got before. So this here gives us a general expression for the commission if the sales are greater than 100,000. Okay, so if we add that onto here, we would have 55,000. Yeah, let's kind of create some more room here. Plus, and then let's just put this commission in brackets like that. Okay, and this is the function for your earnings if the sales are greater than 100,000, like that. And if you want, you can simplify this, right? So notice that 55,000 plus 15,000, that would give us what? That would give us 70,000. And we'd have 0.2 times x minus 100,000. We can distribute the 0.2 inside the bracket. And that would be what? 20,000? And then this would be 50,000 plus 0.2x. Right? So that would be the simplified function. When you look at this, it's not intuitive. When you look at the job description, you look at this, but this is what the function would simplify to. And then again, you could test it with that 120,000. So if we plug in 120,000 here, 20% of 120,000 will give us 24,000 plus 50,000 gives us that same amount of 74,000 that we got before when we did it intuitively. Right? So this makes more intuitive sense than this, but this does simplify to that. So we could put this here if we want. But you know what? I'm just going to, for this question, I'm just going to keep it like this. Now notice that in order for the second job to make more than the first, the sales definitely have to be greater than 100,000. So that's the next thing to take notice of, because notice if the sales are 100,000, right? Let's say we get up right to that limit. What's the total earnings going to be? Well, we would get 15% of that 100,000. So that would be 15,000 plus 55,000. That would give us 70,000. So if we make 100,000 in sales, we're going to get 70,000 in earnings in that second job, which is going to be lower than the 87,000, which means that we for sure in the second job have to make more than 100,000 in sales. That for sure has to happen. And so if we know we have to make 100,000, this is the function that we're going to use. This is going to be the earnings function for that second job. And so in order to solve this, basically just in general, if I erase all this, we know that the second job earnings, what we're looking for is when are the second job earnings going to be greater than the first job earnings? Right? That's pretty much what we're solving for when we're figuring out this question. And the function for this is going to be this over here, Because as we mentioned, the sales definitely have to be greater than 100,000 in order to make more than 87,000, which is the first job earnings. So if we take this, plug it in here, let's put that in brackets. So that's the commission right there. That's the second job earnings. That has to be greater than 87,000. Now you could also take this and just plug it in here. It's going to be a lot less work, but just so you kind of have an intuitive sense of the full inequality that you have to make, I decided to just put that initial structure here because it just makes more sense. But this, again, it simplifies to this. So you could just put this here and you're still going to get that same answer. And so from here, we just got to solve this inequality here. So what would happen is, notice there's nothing in front of this bracket. It's like a +1, so we could actually get rid of these square brackets. I just put them there to differentiate the base salary and the commission. But if we get rid of those, notice this 55,000, this 15,000, those add up to 70,000. Bring it over. 87,000 minus 70,000 would give us 17,000. So we would end up with 0.2x minus 100,000 has to be greater than 17,000. And then from here, what you can do, we could actually divide both sides by 0.2. You could distribute the 0.2 as well. I'll just divide both sides by 0.2. This is like dividing by 1/5. Right? 0.2 is the same as 2/10, which simplifies to 1/5. So 17,000 divided by 1/5 is like 17,000 times 5. Right? So 17,000 divided by 0.2 is the same thing as like 17,000 times 5. So we would end up with x minus 100,000. And then that would be 85,000. That right side. And now we can bring this over, so x has to be greater than 185,000. And that's the answer right there. Right, so that's the minimum amount of sales you have to make in the second job in order for the second job to pay higher than the first. So if you make 185,000 in sales, then they're both going to be equivalent. You're going to make 87,000 at both jobs. Right, so you got to make more than 185,000 in order for that second job to pay higher than the first.